jail cell. They are under trial, accused at this point. So clearly, they will have to abide by all the rules of the jail. However, it won't be as strict as it's for those convicted. But
Right.
what we can tell you is at this point, this comes as
This is after a lot of drama, because Aryan had actually spent the night in the NCB's office, where even as the judicial custody was extended and the bail hearing was posted for today. Vinaya Deshpande now with us on the phone line. Strong case being made that the court has the jurisdiction to grant bail in this matter, but the court saying that the detailed order will be given later. But the operative part is that the applications, bail applications, are not maintainable.
Absolutely. That was the main contention of the NCB, which argued for hours. Remember that the Additional Solicitor General of had appeared in this matter, and that is why he had also argued that all these bail applications are not maintainable in this court. In fact, then I had also broken the details about the reply to Aryan Khan's bail plea by the NCB. It has clearly stated that the NCB felt that this application should be heard in the sessions court and that it is not maintainable in the Kila court, which is right now where the NCB had produced them for custody. That is exactly what the ASG had said in the court. He argued with the help of several judgments that he presented to the court. Even after that, all the three lawyers who represented the three accused tried to make a case saying that the bail plea was in fact maintainable. That was the most important point, the crux of the argument on whether this bail plea was maintainable in this court or not. The court has now ruled that this bail plea is not maintainable in this court, and that is why the bail application has been rejected for all the three accused. What it means now, Anand, is that all the three accused, including Aryan Khan, will have to wait for a copy of the orders so that they can approach the sessions court. Today, by the time the judge dictates the rest of the order, because remember, the judge only dictated the operative part, so the rest of the order to be dictated is going to take a few hours, which may be late at night. By the time the entire order is dictated, it will possibly be 8:30 in the night. Thereafter, all the three parties will get a copy of the order, which means they will be able to move the sessions court for bail only after that. Tomorrow is a Saturday, it's not a working day, which means now the bail applications will have to be moved in the sessions court by Monday, Anand.
So the weekend in the quarantine cell, because there will be no special treatment, we are given to understand.
Yes, absolutely. As we see now that all the accused, including Aryan Khan, have been moved to Arthur Road Prison. Till the time the bail applications are granted, they are heard in the Sessions Court. All of them will continue to stay lodged in the Arthur Road Prison, which is currently in the quarantine cell because of the COVID protocols.
Well, big challenge, but strong arguments were made. But NCB were very clearly trying to say that the maintainability does not hold in the Kila code. What happens next? And has the let's listen into the lawyers' reactions coming through.
बेल एप्लीकेशन ओनली ऑन द मेंटेनेबिलिटी ग्राउंड हमारा बेल एप्लीकेशन रिजेक्ट कर दिया है।
किन का बेल रिजेक्ट हुआ, किस के बेल एप्लीकेशन की सुनवाई हो रही थी, अगर आप बता पाएं विस्तार से?
पहले 3 आरोपी की बेल एप्लीकेशन की सुनवाई हो रही थी, आर्यन खान, अरबाज मर्चेंट और मुनमुन। ये 3 जन की बेल एप्लीकेशन की सुनवाई हुई थी। तीनों के बेल एप्लीकेशन यही पॉइंट पे थे कि ये मैजिस्ट्रेट कोर्ट को बेल सुनने का अधिकार है और उसके ऊपर एडजुडिकेट करने का अधिकार है। और एएसजी ऑनरेबल एएसजी के साइड से यही आर्गुमेंट था कि क्योंकि ये मैटर सेशंस कोर्ट के पास कमिट किया गया है, इसके लिए सिर्फ सेशंस कोर्ट के पास ये अधिकार है, इनके पास अधिकार नहीं है। तो वो आर्गुमेंट को मद्देनजर रखते हुए मैजिस्ट्रेट कोर्ट ने ये हमारा बेल एप्लीकेशन रिजेक्ट कर दिया है।
अब आप लोग इससे आगे क्या करेंगे, क्योंकि बेल तो रिजेक्ट हो गई है, अब जो अक्यूज हैं वो जेल में है, तो आपका प्लान ऑफ एक्शन क्या होगा यहाँ से?
जी, हमारा प्लान ऑफ एक्शन यही होगा कि हम लोग सेशंस कोर्ट मूव करेंगे। हम लोग जितना जल्दी ऑर्डर अपलोड होता है अगले दिन या उसके अगले दिन हम लोग सेशंस कोर्ट में हमारा बेल एप्लीकेशन डालेंगे और वहाँ पे हम लोग यही हमारे पॉइंट्स आर्ग्यू करेंगे कि हमारे खिलाफ कोई भी एविडेंस नहीं है जो हमें बाकी लोगों से कनेक्ट करता है, जिसके वजह से हमें बेल दी जाए। Thank you.
Going back to Mihir and Vinaya. Vinaya, the fact is that if the NCB argued that this matter is with the Sessions Court, Did the lawyers make, on behalf of the first three accused, make a misstep by trying to press the matter in the Killa court? We will
Is
try.
that question for me, Anand?
Yes, Vinaya, go ahead.
Well, if you could please repeat the question, I'm sorry.
Vinaya, the fact is that if the maintainability was the only aspect which was being challenged, was there a misstep or a full day wasted by the lawyers, by the defense, if the matter is with a higher court?
Well, not really,
The
Anand,
NCB
because
lawyer is also speaking. Let's listen to that and I'll come back to you, Vinaya.
कि मैजिस्ट्रेट कोर्ट को अधिकार नहीं था, सेशंस कोर्ट इज द प्रॉपर कोर्ट, लेकिन कौन से ग्राउंड में साहब ने रिजेक्ट किया है वो सब रीजनिंग ऑर्डर आने के बाद ही हम पता कर सकते हैं. थैंक यू वेरी मच. आई हैव कवर्ड एवरीथिंग. थैंक यू वेरी मच.
Well, Vinaya, so once again, the court saying the maintainability is not there with this court. It is in a higher court. Now, if the matter was already there with a higher court, why was this matter pushed to such an extent here in the Killa court? And is this not time that's again going to ensure the defense has lost and that the accused are now going to spend at least the weekend in jail?
Well, Anand, remember that it had taken at least 2 hours of arguments for the ASG to convince the court that this matter is not maintainable in the lower court. Several previous judgments by the higher courts were cited by the Additional Solicitor General while making that argument. In fact, that was the primary argument which seems to have won. NCB seems to have won for that primary argument because that was the primary concern which was tooth and nail opposed by all the 3 defense lawyers who kept on saying that maintainability isn't an issue at this point in time, and that is not the point on which there should be any arguments at all. Arguments should take place on merit basis alone. But that is something that the ASG put his foot down on. He cited several judgments, including Supreme Court judgments, in his at least 2-hour-long arguments before the judge, saying that this was a matter of maintainability, saying that the NCB did argue that all the 3 pleas were not maintainable in the first place in this court at all. This is not the first time that the NCB did give that argument. Remember, even yesterday, when the bail applications were moved in front of the court, even at that time the NCB had said that it is not maintainable in this court, but the detailed argument would have had to be taken today, and that is why the matter was posted today when the NCB did give its own reply to all the 3 accused who had filed their bail applications. Said the same thing. In fact, the copy of the reply of NCB to all the 3 bail applications that we broke in the afternoon itself showed that the primary contention of the NCB was not just the evidence against them for the overall conspiracy, but also the main aspect of maintainability. After the full arguments, the defense could not convince the court that all the 3 bail applications were in fact maintainable in this court, and that is why the court ruled in the favor of NCB, saying that this court could not hear these bail. The exact words of the judge were, these applications are not maintainable and that is why they are rejected. So they never went into the merit in the first place, and the NCB's contention that this was not maintainable was accepted by the judge.
So the arguments were around maintainability, and the NCB or the ASG on behalf of the NCB was able to convince the court on the aspect of maintainability that this court is not eligible, or the bail pleas are not maintainable on this court. And you're saying that these arguments went over more than about 2 hours. Would stay on with us, quickly going across to Mihir, who's joining us from right outside Arthur Road Jail. So this is where the accused will now be brought, and they will have to be held in a quarantine cell. 3 to 5 days minimum they have to stay in this cell, and there are going to be no leeways given.
Absolutely, they will not be given, they won't be given any special treatment. They will be treated like any other under trial accused who are in judicial custody at this point. What we know is that they will have to follow the jail routine. That means they will have to be waking up. They will be woken up at around 6 a.m. That's when everybody in the jail is expected and asked to wake up, and from there their routine begins. They will be given breakfast, and from there the day follows. Lunch will be at some time post noon. After that they will have free time to themselves, but the problem is they are not only in judicial custody but they are also in quarantine cells. So that means Aryan Khan and other accused who have been sent to this Arthur Road jail today will have to stay in that quarantine cell. That means they won't be allowed to step out and probably take some fresh air also, if that is granted. So these are the kind of restrictions they will have to go through.
They spent last evening at the NCB office. They spent last evening at the NCB office, Mihir, where they had access to the lawyers and even access to family. Now, will that be accorded now, even at Arthur Road jail, in the quarantine cell?
Anand, last night, yes, SRK's manager and the legal team of Mansion Day was there, but we were given to understand that it was some paperwork regarding the bail application that had to be completed, and that's why they were there. Apart from that, NCB chief has maintained clearly that there was no special treatment meted out to these people. They were treated as regular accused, and similar is the case in Arthur Road also. They will be treated as normal under trial.
हुई दोनों पक्षों को डिटेल में सुनने के बाद कोर्ट ने फैसला किया है कि तीनों याचिकाएं बेल की रिजेक्ट की गई है। कोर्ट ने अभी तक रीजन्ड ऑर्डर पास नहीं किया है, जो कोर्ट करेगा उसके बाद ही हम बोल सकते हैं कि कौन से युक्तिवाद पे कोर्ट का क्या कहना है।
लेकिन उनका कहना था कि व्यक्तिगत अगर देखें कि अलग अलग आरोपियों के हिसाब से देखें तो बनती है।
कोर्ट ने कोई भी अपना रीजनिंग अभी तक दिया नहीं, तो मैं कोर्ट के रीजनिंग पे कुछ टिप्पणी अभी करना प्रॉपर नहीं।
यानी बचाव पक्ष के तर्क को नहीं माना उन्होंने कि सभी को अलग अलग।
मैं ये बोल नहीं सकता। कोर्ट ने इतना कह दिया है कि बेल एप्लीकेशंस आर रिजेक्टेड। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Yes, Vinay, who was that? Because the NCB council also saying we are awaiting the full order and we are not aware of the grounds how they won the order in their favor. And one of the lawyers of the accused also saying that they will try and move the sessions court tomorrow or later. But is a move possible tomorrow? It just looks like the matter will be now heard only on Monday.
Well, yes, this was Advait Setna telling us that, the court has not yet given any reasons. Clearly, as we have been reporting, Anand, only the operative part has been dictated. So there is no reasoning that the court has given till now for anybody, neither the NCB nor the defendants, to speak about what exactly went wrong. The biggest point being about maintainability. So right now, Advait Setna, who represented NCB, also went on to say that till the time the detailed court order is in hands, they will not be able to comment about what exactly were the reasons or the arguments that the judge did uphold before giving out that order. And right now, as we are being told by several lawyers as well, they will have to wait till the order copy is received, which will be later by tonight, after which they will be able to decide when they can move the sessions court. It looks like if the sessions court is not functioning tomorrow, this will have to be done on Monday only, which means the weekend will have to be spent in Arthur Road prison by all the persons who have been arrested, including Aryan Khan. Anand.
Well, so they spent last night at the NCB office, and after that today in the morning they were taken to Arthur Road jail, and now they head back into that quarantine cell, do they?
Well, yes, Anand, remember there was a reason why they spent the entire night in the NCB lockup. That was because of the COVID protocols that exist in Maharashtra at present, and this is applicable to all the accused who have been arrested in the last 1.5 years. We have seen in several cases where the accused were sentenced to custody, police custody. They have had to spend their nights within the individual police station lockups till the time they received a negative RT-PCR report, till the time that report cleared them of COVID-19, only after which jails accepted them. So So this has been a protocol in Maharashtra for over a year and a half now, and that is exactly what was applicable in this case as well. Yesterday evening, by the time the proceedings got over, it was already post 7 p.m. Thereafter, the court was informed that though judicial custody was granted for all the accused, it was not possible to move them into any prison at this point because of the mandatory term that COVID-19 RT-PCR report is needed, and that has to be negative. So after the court order of judicial custody yesterday, even then you remember there were arguments when neither the defendants argued or had any objections about the judge sending all the accused to NCB custody only for a day, and that is why all the accused were put under Zonal Director Samir Wankhede's charge for one night, and today they were moved to Arthur Road Prison.
So no bail for Aryan Khan, Munmun and Arbaz Merchant, the three accused who will now have to spend, as it looks like, the weekend in jail. Short break here on The Nation at 5. Stay with us.
Group? No, it isn't. It is just the Lashkar giving itself a new name to avoid its lord and master Pakistan from getting into trouble with the FATF over terror financing. Most of its 30-odd cadre are local boys, though there is a Pakistan element to it as well. Here is what else we know of the TRF. The Resistance Front, also known as the Shaheed Ghazi Squad. It's the new terror kid on the block, responsible for the spate of targeted killings in Srinagar. The group essentially is a front for the Lashkar, whose leadership was wiped out in intensive anti-terror operations in the valley. Post the abrogation of Article 370, the Lashkar activated their overground workers and organized them into a group to derail the process of integration underway. Their modus operandi is different from their parent organization. The Lashkar used high-end, heavy weapons and explosives and usually targeted security forces. But then it had to pay a heavy price for it. Much of their cadre was wiped out in retaliatory fire and anti-terror ops by security forces. With the anti-infiltration grid in overdrive, battle-hardened terrorists, big weapons and explosives could not be smuggled in. So the Lashkar reinvented, with the blessings of the ISI, and started the trend of targeted killings with small weapons like pistols. Carrying small arms like pistols are safer as they can evade detection. Plus, when you target unarmed innocent civilians, teachers and traders and chemists like ML Bindru, there is no fear of an immediate fireback. The goal of instilling fear and panic in the hearts of Hindus and Sikh minorities or non-locals or those working for the state is achieved with minimum expenses, training and effort. Data from the Home Ministry says that there was a 60% drop in terror incidents since the abrogation of Article 370. But what has been on the rise is the drone drop of small arms and hand grenades in Jammu and Kashmir. The worry is that targeted killings of civilians with small arms is a trend we will see more of as winter approaches and the government looks at conducting elections in the Union Territory. Civilian killings have not just raised concerns in the valley, it has also raised the cost for security forces. It'll be a challenge to deal with this new threat. With that, it's a wrap from me. Thanks for watching. Hello everyone, good evening. I'm Shreya Dhondial. Today, two terrorists walked into the Sangam school in Srinagar and at gunpoint asked the teachers present there to identify themselves. Their I-cards were checked. The Sikh principal, Satinder Kaur, and a Kashmiri Pandit teacher, Deepak Chand, were asked to step out. Then they were shot dead in cold blood. They were killed because they are minorities in Kashmir. Just like chemist ML Bangru was, just like jeweler Satpal Nishchal was, just like restaurant owner Akash Mehra was. These are targeted killings. Minorities in Kashmir see it for what it is, an attempt by Pakistan-based terrorists to convey the message in blood that they are still around and can strike at will. Is this a rerun of the 1990s, when 70,000 Kashmiris were forced to flee their homes with a gun on their head? Why has the abrogation of Article 370 been seen as an instrument of demographic change in the valley? And is the spate of killings in Srinagar also a reflection of the administration's failure, a policing failure? We are looking at all of that over the next 30 minutes right here on Debrief. Let's start first with what happened.
Makhan Lal Bindru, a Kashmiri Pandit. Virendra Paswan, a Hindu migrant. Satinder Kaur, a Sikh school principal. And Deepak Chand, a Kashmiri teacher. 3 days, 3 cowardly attacks. 4 members of the minority community gunned down in cold blood. In total, 7 civilians have been murdered since last Saturday.
This is the Sangam school where this incident has happened, where 2 teachers have been shot, one a woman and another male from Jammu. Clearly, Director General of Police has come. He along with policemen are taking stock of the situation.
उसी शोर के अजमा में उसके बाद ही मतलब हमने गन शॉट सुने, मतलब हम शॉक हो गए कि ये गन शॉट्स कैसे, हम बाहर नहीं निकल पाए उस टाइम। प्रिंसिपल मैम थी और एक था टीचर, ये यहाँ बाहर बैठे हुए थे इन कुर्सियों पर बैठे। जी जी।
The families of Satinder Kaur and Deepak Chand are besides themselves in grief, shocked at the cold brutality in which the lives of their loved ones were snuffed out by men who know no mercy.
उसका फोन ऑन है और वो फोन उठा रहे हैं।
तो आपका कहना है कि आतंकियों के पास उसका फोन है?
हाँ जी।
बोलो, वो कह रहे हैं कि आप लोग यहाँ आओ, आपका भी यही हाल करेंगे।
It's a grim hark-back to the days of the early 90s of the Intifada in Kashmir, when innocent Pandits were wantonly slaughtered by terrorists. This time too, the intent seems to be clear, with 3 initials responsible for the mayhem in the valley: TRF.
TRF is actually a conglomeration of all terror groups which are operating here, be it Hizbul Mujahideen, be it LAT. There is a pattern. They are targeting minorities, actually non-locals and minorities, and they want local communal harmony to be disturbed.
ये एक साजिश है और ख़ास करके वो जो बाहर से लोग जो माइग्रेंट हुए थे उनको वापस लाने की जो प्रक्रिया चल रही है केंद्रीय सरकार की तरफ से, उसको ये ख़राब करने की कोशिश की जा रही है। लेकिन इससे उस मूव पर कोई अफेक्ट पड़ेगा ऐसा नहीं है और जल्द ही वहाँ पर हमारे हिंदू भाई जो वहाँ से माइग्रेट होकर के गए थे उनको दोबारा बसाया जाएगा।
That's the spirit of Naya Jammu and Kashmir, one which Bindru Sahab and his family epitomized.
I don't have a single tear in my eyes. Why? Because he's a fighter. He'll die like a fighter. He always said, I'll die with my shoes on. But whoever is the person who shot my father dead, mister, come in front of me. You want to fight with guns and the stones? That is all cowardness.
You can kill us due to your cowardice, but you will never be able to kill our spirit. With Bureau Inputs, Ritangshu Bhattacharya for CNN News 18.
ये woman, मेरे बाप की बेटी.
6 hours after the killings, we have heard from the LG of Jammu and Kashmir, Manoj Sinha, and PDP leader Mehbooba Mufti. She says this is a complete failure of the BJP that controls the union territory. He says, हिसाब होगा।
It's a big diplomatic win for India as the UK now has revoked its mandatory quarantine rule for Indians. The rule will be implemented starting the 11th of October. UK has also decided to accept the Indian vaccine certificate. Meanwhile, Sources have told News 18 that India's health ministry is also going to issue fresh guidelines for foreign nationals from the United Kingdom following the country's order to discontinue mandatory testing and quarantine norms for those vaccinated with Covishield travelling from India to the UK.
From Monday the 11th of October, a traveller from India to the UK, double jabbed with Covishield or another vaccine recognised by the UK regulator, does not have to quarantine. So it'll be easier and cheaper to enter the UK. So let's now go further. Let's open up more flights between the two countries. Let's get British tourists able to come into India. They're desperate to do so. Let's facilitate business travellers who are trying to come into India with e-visas. This is a further step down the road set by Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Johnson when they agreed the comprehensive strategic partnership between our two countries in May.
Sanjay Suri with us on the phone line. Sanjay, they've woken up finally?
Well, they have realized that this could really hurt them where they least need to be hurt, and that is in the immediate, the Prime Minister visits that are due. Is not confirmed, but Boris Johnson was expected in India later this month. Certainly, Prime Minister Modi is expected in the UK at the start of next month. But also next week, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal will be in London, and that is a meeting with very critical matters to discuss on the agenda on a trade agreement. And the UK is a little nervous that this issue would have been clouded those trade talks and perhaps may even have prevented an agreement from taking place. As we know, and Piyush Goyal has given an undertaking to the British that India will open up particularly Scotch whisky with a larger quota and reduced tariffs. So that would, if that were to change and if that commitment were to be withdrawn, that certainly would hurt the British, and they want to sweet talk the Indians now.
Well, we'll have to see if they extend the same courtesy to those who have been vaccinated with Covaxin. Because that approval of the WHO is also around the corner and expected very, very soon. Thank you for your input, Sanjay. Meanwhile, lockdowns during the COVID-19 pandemic also affected the rural economy. In a village close to the India-Pakistan border in Amritsar, Kathleen Ladder was moved by the plight of poor families who were struggling to make ends meet. That's when she rose to create a self-help group to make women self-reliant. Network 18 and Federal Bank's COVID vaccine awareness campaign, Sanjeevani, A Shot of Life, caught up with her recently for going beyond the call of duty and empowering women. Kathleen is our Sanjeevani champion.
For the women of Dayal Bhatti, it's time to get to work, time to earn some money. And their leader is Kathleen Ladder, and they are here to make lemon pickle. And it's really simple. All they need are some lemons, chilies and ginger, then they're all sliced, salted and then mixed in mustard oil. Finally, the pickle is bottled. For a few days they will be left in the sun, and then it's ready to be sold.
सर लॉकडाउन जब शुरू हुआ तो लोग घरों में बैठे थे, काम काज कोई नहीं था बिल्कुल, मतलब वो आर्थिक हालात उनके बहुत कमज़ोर हो गए थे, हालात बद से बदतर हो गए थे, बहुत ख़राब थे, लोगों के पास मतलब राशन के लिए भी बड़ा मुश्किल हो रहा था। हमने एक ग्रुप शुरू किया, सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप, जिसमें 10 लेडीज़ को लिया और 10 लेडीज़ ने हमने यहीं पर बैठ के काम शुरू किया।
The women realized their strength was in their unity. Together, in their self-help group, they could achieve much more. And so they started making masks and paper bags, which they sold in the village in the thousands.
सोच हमारी यही थी कि लेडीज़ जो है वो आत्मनिर्भर हो सकें और अपने मतलब घरों के हालात जो हैं उनके वो थोड़े ठीक हो सके। काम और कर सकते हैं, जैसे ये काम तो हमारे चल रहे हैं, जूट का बैग बना सकते हैं, सिलाई का काम लेडीज़ कर सकती हैं, ब्यूटिशियन का काम कर सकती हैं, वो जिसमें मतलब जिस लेडी का इंटरेस्ट है उसको हम सिखा सकते हैं काम।
इस उदाहरण से मैंने सीखा कि लोगों के पास, लेडीज़ के पास टैलेंट है, लेकिन वो घर से बाहर निकल कर काम नहीं कर पाती। तो जो उनके पास टैलेंट है हम उसका यूज़ करेंगे और उनको काम देंगे और वो काम करेंगी, बाहर निकलेंगी और उनकी जो आमदनी है वो भी बढ़ेगी, आर्थिक स्थिति में बढ़ोतरी होगी। वो खुद से कुछ भी अपने लिए काम कर सकती हैं, अपने लिए जी सकती हैं, किसी के दूसरे के ऊपर निर्भर नहीं रहेगी।
सिर्फ 10 लेडीज़ जो हैं उनका ही नहीं, मतलब 10 परिवारों की आमदनी बढ़ी है और उन जो लेडीज़ हैं उनका सशक्तिकरण भी हुआ है। तो हम कह सकते हैं कि ये एक मिसाल बन चुकी है कैथलिन का जो ग्रुप है कि दूसरी लेडीज़ के लिए, दूसरी औरतों के लिए।
Indeed, and for empowering women, these leaders of Dayal Bhatti are our Sanjeevani champions.
Dr. Veena Tandon, pulmonologist, Indraprastha Apollo Hospitals, is with us. Dr. Veena, welcome back. Good to have a conversation with you as always. Now let's focus on the weather change and the season change. And should we be worried? Because there is also a recent spike in the total number of COVID cases on a day-to-day basis. Not very, very huge spurt, but it is showing some rises. And then, of course, you would have the seasonal changes, dengue, and we talked about tuberculosis the last time around. So how do you see the situation?
Hi, good evening, everyone. So yes, there is a season change on the cards. And of course, we always see that during the winter season, we do have increase in the respiratory viruses, which do cause a little bit of problem here and there. So what we all think, the pulmonologists as well as the internists, all of us think COVID is going to remain here. It's not absolutely out. And all of us do have to follow COVID appropriate behavior, in addition to keeping in mind that COVID is not absolutely out, and there will be surges here and there, which is called the endemic city of a particular disease, which will remain there. It would be something like H1N1 influenza, which is called swine flu in common language, if you ask me. So swine flu also has surges during the winter and late monsoon months, which has happened during this season as well. We have seen a lot of swine flu cases coming to us, which were mostly, mild kind of cases. And with especially the rise in the number of vaccinations, which has happened, now COVID is going to be something which is going to present like a mild respiratory viral disease, which is just like a flu kind of an illness. And those with comorbidities and those who have compromised immune systems, they might have a moderate disease needing a little bit of oxygen here and there, who would be coming to the hospital. But yes, definitely the number of deaths and severe or critical COVID-19, which is the requirement of any kind of respiratory support, which means the ventilation, is going to go down, and it has actually gone down drastically.
Well, Dr. Veena Tandon, today, paucity of time, we've got plenty of ground to cover, so we're going to keep this conversation short. Thank you very, very much. Always a pleasure speaking with you.
Meanwhile, thank you so much.
Thank you. Meanwhile, are sanitizers harmful? Do vaccines modify your DNA? Can they infect you with COVID-19? Well, some of the questions that can be there as doubts. There is a space where all your queries can be answered. As part of Network 18 and Federal Bank's campaign, a WhatsApp helpline has been launched. All you have to do is WhatsApp on the number 7977773753. You'll probably receive answers to questions that you have in your mind, information which has been verified and cross-checked. So go ahead and WhatsApp your questions on COVID-19 on this number 7977773753.
आपने टीका लगाया क्या?
टीका लगा, ओ जरा टीका लगा। जब अपनी बारी आए टीका लगा। टीका लगा, ओ जरा टीका लगा। जब अपनी बारी आए टीका लगा। टीका लगा, ओ जरा टीका लगा। ओ जरा टीका 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 टीका।
लगाया क्या?
लगवा ले चुबन जरा सहले सहले तू सबसे ये कह ले है जन ही तुम्हें जाने बिन लगाया क्या? जब अपनी बारी आए टीका लगा.
And near to their heart. India has to retaliate not only in Kashmir, but wherever and whoever it is necessary. Take them out and take them out mercilessly. And overground workers, terrorist sympathizers and terrorists, there is no difference in my opinion, ma'am. I have been making this point for years. Overground worker is a terrorist, terrorist is a terrorist, and terrorist sympathizer is a terrorist, is as good as a terrorist. And especially the people who will come on TV panels to give them intellectual cover fire, they will blame everybody except that goddamn bloody terrorist who pulled the gun. They will not blame him. They will blame everybody. This has to stop. This hypocrisy has to be called out.
General Hasnan, I completely agree with Sumit there. Look at, for example, the TRF, the organization, the terror organization that has been behind most killings post the abrogation of Article 370. We understand that it is a cover for the Lashkar, but these are made up mostly of overgrown workers. Overground workers, I beg your pardon. And the pattern we are seeing is not the big arms that the Lashkar uses, but small arms like pistols, which are easy to hide. So you just go into Sangam school, two of you, take out a pistol from your pocket, shoot dead people you want to after you have identified them, and run away.
Sure, absolutely. You see, 30 years of terror in Kashmir has actually witnessed a tremendous dynamism in the manner in which it has been conducted. If you remember, there was no such thing as street protests in the 90s. That all emerged in 2008. The amount of terrorists that you had existing together, you used to find them operating in 15s and 16s and 20s earlier. Subsequently, it came down to 3s and 4s. So there is a very dynamic nature of terror based upon the capability at any one time. What you're seeing is one of the reasons is that the strength of the terrorists has been reduced to such an extent.
Correct.
The weaponry available with them has been reduced to a very great extent. The most important aspect about the TRF is that it's a question of obfuscation. You see, in terrorist tactics, in their strategy, obfuscation is very important. It must not appear, the adversary must not be able to target and focus on a specific objective, a specific target within the terrorist organization. And this is how it achieves it. A very important aspect also is the fact he doesn't bear an Islamic name. No Lashkar-e-Toiba, no Jaish-e-Muhammad, Hizbul Mujahideen. He's carrying a typical English name, resistance. And this is the projection to the FATF, with all the surveillance of the FATF over the years which has gone on. This is a very important aspect of it. And the whole idea behind this here is to disturb the communal harmony. Prevent the return of the Kashmiri Pandits. If they can do this with the acts by two people carrying two pistols going into a school, then obviously why would they want to do a Pulwama? They can achieve this doing it this. So this is the manner in which they operate, and we have to understand these tactics. The Jammu and Kashmir police and the army are very, very adept at this. They know it very well, and they know how to calibrate the kind of operations that they need to conduct. Unfortunately, in this case, it will have to be a responsive operations. It should be offensive operations. I fully agree. There must be very, very offensive operations, not only across the line of control in areas in Pakistan, wherever the sponsorship comes from, but within Jammu and Kashmir, against the terror networks, against the overground workers, something which has been going on very successfully in the last 4 years. But it needs to probably gain more.
All right. I'm completely out of time, but Sumit Peer, it was good to have you on the show. General Hasnan, as always, good to have you on this show. Some reports coming in that already Hindu teachers in central Kashmir, some of them have been shifted to security camps from their accommodation. But is this a long-term solution really? Not really. We're tracking that story, but a quick break on that note. Up next, we are taking a close look at the Resistance Front, the terror outfit responsible for the recent spate of killings in Srinagar. That's up next. Do stay with us. Post the abrogation of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir, the name of the Resistance Front has cropped up with almost every attack and killing. Is the TRF a new militant group? No, it isn't. It is just the Lashkar giving itself a new name to avoid its lord and master Pakistan from getting into trouble with the FATF over terror financing. Most of its 30-odd cadre are local boys, though there is a Pakistan element to it as well. Here is what else we know of the TRF. The Resistance Front, also known as the Shaheed Ghazi Squad. It's the new terror kid on the block, responsible for the spate of targeted killings in Srinagar. The group essentially is a front for the Lashkar, whose leadership was wiped out in intensive anti-terror operations in the valley. Post the abrogation of Article 370, the Lashkar activated their overground workers and organized them into a group to derail the process of integration underway. Their modus operandi is different from their parent organization. The Lashkar used high-end, heavy weapons and explosives and usually targeted security forces. But then it had to pay a heavy price for it. Much of their cadre was wiped out in retaliatory fire and anti-terror ops by security forces. With the anti-infiltration grid in overdrive, battle-hardened terrorists, big weapons and explosives could not be smuggled in. So the Lashkar reinvented, with the blessings of the ISI, and started the trend of targeted killings with small weapons like pistols. Carrying small arms like pistols are safer as they can evade detection. Plus, when you target unarmed innocent civilians, teachers and traders and chemists like ML Bindru, there is no fear of an immediate fireback. The goal of instilling fear and panic in the hearts of Hindus and Sikh minorities or non-locals or those working for the state is achieved with minimum expenses, training and effort. Data from the Home Ministry says that there was a 60% drop in terror incidents since the abrogation of Article 370. But what has been on the rise is the drone drop of small arms and hand grenades in Jammu and Kashmir. The worry is that targeted killings of civilians with small arms is a trend we will see more of as winter approaches and the government looks at conducting elections in the Union Territory. Civilian killings have not just raised concerns in the valley, it has also raised the cost for security forces. It'll be a challenge to deal with this new threat. With that, it's a wrap from me. Thanks for watching. Hello everyone, good evening. I'm Shreya Dhondial. Today, two terrorists walked into the Sangam school in Srinagar and at gunpoint asked the teachers present there to identify themselves. Their iCards were checked. The Sikh principal, Satinder Kaur, and a Kashmiri Pandit teacher, Deepak Chand, were asked to step out. Then they were shot dead.
Welcome back, and disturbing news coming through from Afghanistan. The attack on Shiites, which was expected, Shias, has perhaps now started soon after the Friday prayers. A tragic turn of events. At least 50 people are now expected to be feared dead in Kunduz. It was a Shia mosque in Kunduz where around the Friday prayers there was a huge blast and dozens are wounded in this blast. That's what we're given to understand. The death toll is expected to rise. Ladies and gentlemen, the pictures can be a little disturbing. We've been very judicious in the use and showing pictures. Some of the pictures are very, very disturbing. Shailendra Wangu now joining us with more details. Kunduz के इस मस्जिद में जुम्मे की नमाज के अराउंड ये ब्लास्ट हुआ है, ये खबर आ रही है।
बिल्कुल आनंद, ये कुंदूज प्रोविंस है जो कि काबुल से करीब 350 किलोमीटर दूर है और ये प्रोविंस में जो ये मॉस्क है, शियाइट मॉस्क है, वहां पर उस वक्त फ्राइडे प्रेयर्स चल रही थी जब वहां पर माना जा रहा है कि सुसाइड बॉम्बिंग हुई है। और ये बॉम्बिंग के बाद जो खबरें आ रही हैं कि करीब 100 से ज्यादा लोगों की इसमें मौत बताई जा रही है और कई लोग जख्मी बताए जा रहे हैं। जिस वक्त ये हमला हुआ उस वक्त वहां पर बहुत से लोग फ्राइडे प्रेयर्स के चलते मौजूद थे, और हमको ये सुसाइड बॉम्बिंग याद दिलाती है उसी घटना की जो काबुल एयरपोर्ट के पास ISIS ने जो धमाका किया था जब अमेरिकन फोर्सेस वहां से विड्रॉ कर रही थी। उस वक्त भी इतनी ही बड़ी तादाद में लोग वहां पर मारे गए थे, बल्कि ज्यादा लोग मारे गए थे। आपको बता दें कि फिलहाल ये क्लियर नहीं है कि इस ब्लास्ट के पीछे कौन है, लेकिन बताया जा रहा है कि जो एक हिस्ट्री रही है कि इस्लामिक स्टेट की जो लगातार इस तरह की शियाइट मुस्लिम माइनॉरिटी को टारगेट करते आ रहे हैं अफगानिस्तान में,
पर ये
तो हो सकता है कि
देखिए ये इस्लामिक स्टेट IS खुरासन कहें, अपने आप को अलकायदा कहें या तालिबान कहें, ये सब एक ही थाली के चट्टे बट्टे हैं। एंड दिस फैक्ट इज दैट इनको शिया पसंद नहीं है, और इन्होंने जिस तरह से इनका ये रहा है, रुझान रहा है, ये शिया को टारगेट करेंगे, और यही हुआ, यही एक्सपेक्टेशन, यही कहा गया था जब तालिबान का टेक ओवर हुआ था। वी हैव सुशांत सरीन विद अस। शैलेंद्र वांगू, थैंक यू फॉर योर इनपुट्स। सुशांत सरीन, limited time viewers to join us for another issue, but this is a development that has happened, and we had talked about this. Multiple experts had said this will what will happen. Targeted killings will begin, and look what they have done. A suicide bomb attack inside a Shia mosque in Kunduz.
Yeah, Anand, this is not targeted killing. I think this is pure and simple massacre of Shias. Which was also being anticipated. And I think you are absolutely on the money when you say that there's very little to choose between the Islamic State or the Taliban or any of these other characters when it comes to anti-Shia rhetoric and anti-Shia sentiment. And I can show you any number of these guys, who on their, for public consumption, they say something, but personally and ideologically, they are rabidly anti-Shia. Now, Kunduz, of course, has been one of the places where the IS-KP has a very strong presence. It is one of those provinces, number one. Number two, but that is also a province in which many of the TTP guys have been transferred by the Taliban for for their own safety. They've been given certain safe havens in Kunduz. And we know that there is a lot of overlapping between the Taliban, the TTP, and the IS-KP. It's all very mixed up. Yeah. There are no clear dividing lines between them. But yeah, Shias are, it's an open season on the Shias. We've had instances, you're talking about this particular massacre. There are reports now coming from the center of Afghanistan, which is the Bamiyan region, where there are the Hazaras are present in large numbers, of massacres taking place out there as well. They've just not been publicized as much as this current blast has been publicized. But yes, I think in a manner of speaking, this is going to be the new normal. Now, this could partly be to destabilize the Taliban, because there is also a tussle going on between these guys. So there could be one of the reasons to do it. But what really interests me is how are the Iranians going to react to what has happened today? Yeah. Because the Iranians have been more or less, they have become a little withdrawn from the support they were giving to the Taliban. But going forward, will they have certain asks of the Taliban to ensure security for the Shias and demand demonstrable action? Or will they actually start taking some action on their own and send in some of the Shia militias, the Zenubian and the Fatimiyun brigades, which they have, of Afghans and Pakistanis, into Afghanistan to push back against the Sunni extremists?
Well, Sushant Sareen, thank you for your inputs. Tragic turn of events. Now we're going to understand more than 100 are dead. That's all we have time for in this edition of The Nation at 5. Viewpoint with Zaka right now.
Good evening, this is Viewpoint. I'm Zaka Jacob. A significant story that News18.com broke this morning. A few days ago, Chinese PLA team encroached into Tawang in the eastern sector and tried to destroy some defenses. The Indian Army gave a befitting response. There was an on-ground meeting which finally resolved the situation. Now, in addition to whatever's been happening in Ladakh over the last year or so, that's in the western sector, we've also had the incursion in Barahoti in the middle sector and now in Tawang in the eastern sector. What exactly is going on? Is there at some level a certain amount of desperation evident amongst the Chinese and particularly the PLA? But first, let's get to the story. All right, joining us on the talking point this evening, Shah Rukh Khan is national spokesperson of the BJP, Praveen Swami, group consulting editor with Network 18, Lieutenant General retired B.S. Jaiswal is the former army commander of the Northern Command, and Andrew Liang will be joining us, independent strategist based out of Hong Kong. Praveen, I'll start with you first. Like I said in the setup piece, you've had over the last 3 or 4 weeks, first we've had the Western sector incursions, which have been happening for the last year or so, then in Barahoti in Uttarakhand earlier in September, and now in Tawang. All 3 sectors, the Chinese over the last few weeks and months have tried attempted incursions. What does that signify to you?
The ongoing negotiated effort to disengage troops in various contested areas in eastern Ladakh. China has no intention of easing the pressure of the Indian army. Remember that because of reasons of geography, first and foremost, but secondly because of the accelerated border development program it initiated many years ago, China is able to deploy troops much more rapidly across the length of the LEC than India, and that therefore guarding the border requires asymmetric commitments which impose a huge financial and personnel drain on the Indian army. China, to me, seems to be signaling that while it may be willing to negotiate and make some moves towards ending the face-off in eastern Ladakh, it's not willing to ease up on the pressure. And that, of course, has to do with larger issues like China's ambition to be the preeminent geopolitical power in the region. And profoundly unhappy about India's growing relationship with the US and the Quad and so on. So the story sadly looks like it's set to continue.
All right. Shah Rukh Khan, the question that's also being asked is we've had 12 rounds of these ground level, commander level talks, but somehow nothing seems to be giving. Yes, in Pangong there's been some amount of disengagement, in Gogra there's been some amount of disengagement, but this has been going on for the better part of well over a year now. Are these negotiations failing, or are the Chinese just intent, as Praveen said, on keeping the pressure on?
Daka, I think the Chinese want to continue in their mischievous ways, and it is a way for them to show both their frustration and their unhappiness with the way India has been progressing, the way India has stood firm about everything. Now adding on to that, there is the Quad issue. So overall, I think China just wants to play mischief maker. The important thing to remember about today's incident is that one, no Indian property was damaged. The Chinese were on Indian territory, but they were pushed back. That's another thing. And the third thing we have to remember is that till there is a clear demarcation of Indo-Chinese borders, these kind of skirmishes might continue. And it has happened in the past, but as usual, our unflinching faith in Indian army stands firm. They have been pushed back as they were done last time as well.
No, so General Jaiswal, what Praveen mentioned as well, and what Charu is also saying, that could this be in response to what we've seen, the geopolitical moves that India has made over the last few weeks, whether it is Quad, and then of course there was the AUKUS announcement that happened. Is there a feeling in China that they are being cornered by the US, its allies and other friendly countries like India, and therefore this is its way of keeping up pressure on India?
Good evening, Zaka. There are 3-4 related issues to this. One, what Mr. Praveen Swami has said is absolutely right. But if you see China, for them, the cynosure is still Taiwan. As far as Indian context is concerned, I'll flip a page and go back to 59, when Zhao had said that you give up Aksai Chin and we will let go Arunachal.
Yeah.
Similarly, Deng had also said in 1981. But now they're claiming both. So if you extrapolate, Arunachal is the bargaining geographical area for Aksai Chin. This should be understood. Now, as far as China's policy is concerned, they've graduated from creeping assertiveness to a coercive strategy. That included even the diplomatic isolation, of the neighboring countries, diplomatically, taking actions against India. and string of pearls, etc. came up. But on ground now, this coercive strategy has manifested in terms of capturing certain, not what we call capturing, but intruding into certain areas. So this is part of the overall philosophy to cause pressure on Arunachal so that the pressure is relieved in Siachen, as also make India agree to this, that sorry, you take Siachen and we will not touch upon, they will not touch upon Arunachal. So that is the reason. And yeah, Tawang, that is the whole of Arunachal area, 1146 kilometers. I've served there, so I know every inch of it. I was the corps commander there. So I know every inch. Now, the difficult part in Arunachal is that especially if you go further towards the right of Tawang, the area is called RALP, Rest of Arunachal Pradesh. Now that is a very difficult terrain for us to mobilize troops, the troop to ground density out there, etc. We have made a lot of steps, we have taken a lot of steps to connect the areas, but I would like to quote again a particular line way back in 2013. I was in Itanagar for a seminar, it was a strategic seminar, and out there we were talking, I spoke on Arunachal. There were some students in the university, they got up asking questions. He said there are villages on the border which are dependent on the Chinese villages because there is no connectivity with India. So they are going out there. What exactly is India doing about it? So I think after the recommendation had gone, they did. We have now gone in for road and infrastructure development out there. But the fact is that RALP area, it's very thinly occupied. We have now 17 corps also operational for that matter. But still, China can, posture on a border in Arunachal, causing pressure on us.
Okay, I want to go across to Andrew Leung as well, joining us from Hong Kong. Andrew, how much of this is born out of domestic concerns? We know that there's huge pressure, for example, on the Chinese real estate market. The biggest real estate company there is on the brink of bankruptcy. There's been this massive campaign that Xi Jinping has launched against cultural stuff, whether it is K-pop bands, against education companies, against the fintech sector. And in a way, also, there is this perception that the US, along with its friends and allies, is trying to corner China. So is the Chinese administration, the Chinese government trying to divert attention by these incursions, whether it is in Arunachal Pradesh, whether it is in Uttarakhand, or whether it is, of course, in Ladakh?
Well, the first part of your interpretation is correct. The second part less so, in the sense that there is no doubt that Beijing is well aware that led by the United States, there's a 360 degrees pushback against China on all fronts, especially in the South China Sea and the Asia Pacific, including the so-called freedom of navigation naval patrols, including Americans' allies, for example, recently, the United Kingdom and even France. And now, more recently, the formation of the so-called AUKUS with Australia, supplying Australia with nuclear-propelled submarines. And of course, in the court you mentioned. Now, however, Taiwan is way apart from these considerations because Taiwan has always been regarded as Chinese runaway province, and the so-called One China policy. And the One China policy has been upheld, at least verbally, by the United States. And even in the recent dialogue
Mr. Leung,
between the United States
the problem
and China,
is that you have Mr. Leung. Once again, the problem is, Mr. Leung, you have in Taiwan 4 or 5 million people who simply do not want to be associated with China, who don't want to be reunited with China. In fact, the majority opinion in Taiwan is not for reunification with China. And that's why the current dispensation under Tsai Ing-wen has taken a very, very strident stand. And yet the Chinese are sending in bombers. I think a few days ago we had over 50 bombers being sent. The question is, if it came down to a military accession of Taiwan, when a majority of the Taiwanese people don't want to join in, then you're essentially looking at a full-fledged limited war, if you will, because the US is treaty bound to defend Taiwan in case it's militarily attacked by China.
Yeah, well, there is a different dimensions in what you mentioned. True, over 95% or even more of the Taiwanese people do not want unification. However, there's 1 million Taiwanese with their families working and investing and living on mainland China, and they are also voters in Taiwan. And also, the Taiwan economy is in many ways bound up with the economy of China. So quite a large majority of Taiwanese, even though they don't want unification, they don't want to rock the boat. They want to maintain the status quo. And of course, the United States is in the interest of the United States to maintain the status quo, not to allow
everybody wants Taiwan, but also to maintain the status quo except China and except Xi Jinping, because I think they've put it down now in a document that before 2049 they want to reintegrate and reunify Taiwan. I want to thank all our guests because we're getting this big piece of breaking news that's coming in from Afghanistan. At least 100 people are feared dead, dozens wounded. This is in a blast that happened in the Kunduz province. AFP is reporting that the death toll is expected to rise even further. The blast targeted a Shia mosque. This was during Friday prayers in Kunduz. We're given to understand that a large number of Shias, in fact, had also connections with Iran coming in through the border between Iran and Afghanistan. But these are preliminary estimates. These are initial pictures that you're getting of people carrying away dead bodies in cloth, in stretchers, and you can see the crater that's been left behind. It's a very, very deep crater, giving the intensity of the blast. Let me go across to Praveen. He has more details on this and more perspective on this. So is this a Shia versus Sunni thing, or is this Taliban versus potentially Iranians who could have come there? What exactly is the cause of this blast, or the reason behind it?
We've had a long history of attacks on the Shia community in Afghanistan. Many terrible bombings, attacks, massacres conducted both by the Taliban and by the ISIS or so-called Islamic State over the years. Now, in this particular case, we don't know which group or groups may be directly involved, of course. But early indications suggest that it was carried out by ISIS or attackers associated with ISIS. Kunduz is a sort of complicated area which has a large Shia population, but also a history of a strong Taliban presence made up of various ethnic Pashtun pockets. There in the north, you have a history of Islamic State presence. And also a number of jihadists of Pakistani origin who've been relocated or active in that area. So just, irrespective of who specifically carried out, an indication that these hopes that the Taliban would come to power and restore order are an illusion. Remember, the Shia not the only community being targeted right now. We've had attacks against ethnic Hazaras in central Afghanistan. We've had reports of killings of people associated with the former government, fighting between different factions in areas like Jalalabad. So a really ugly situation, and no sign at all that the end of, the rise of the Taliban, there is going to be peace or security.
Praveen, give me a moment to stay on with us. I'm also joined by an Afghan journalist, Hadith. He's joining us on the phone line from Kabul. Hadith, what more details do you have? AFP is reporting at least 100 people feared dead. Is there any preliminary... all right, we'll try and go back to Hadith in just 1 second. He was joining us on the phone line from Kabul. So this blast happened during Friday prayers. Over 100 people are feared dead, and AFP is reporting that death toll is likely to go up further. This is in the Kunduz province, which of course has deep connections with Iran as well. This was a Shia mosque, and we know that these ethnic fault lines in Afghanistan have been ripped open with the return of the Taliban capturing power again in the middle of August, leading to the fall of Kabul and the withdrawal of the US troops. But this ethnic fault line that Praveen was talking about, whether it is Shia Sunni, whether it is the ethnic Hazaras, in this case the ethnic Shias. Shailendra Wangu is joining us. He tracks the Ministry of External Affairs for Network 18. Shailendra, कोई इनिशियल डिटेल्स है कि ये जो हादसा जो हुई है इसके पीछे किसकी हाथ थी? कोई ग्रुप ने अभी तक रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी लिया है? और जो प्रवीण स्वामी भी कह रहे थे, ये जो एथनिक फॉल्ट लाइन है सुन्नी वर्सेस शिया, यही तो सबकी डर थी कि ऐसा एथनिक फॉल्ट लाइन को रिप ओपन हो जाएगा तालिबान के बाद. ये क्या कुछ एथनिक कॉन्फ्लिक्ट था शिया और सुन्नी के बीच में?
देखिए जाका, ये फॉल्ट लाइन पहले से ही वहां पर रही हैं और आपको जो हमारे पास जो डिटेल्स अब तक सामने आई हैं उसके मुताबिक 100 से ज्यादा लोगों की इसमें मौत बताई जा रही है, क्योंकि फ्राइडे प्रेयर्स जब वहां चल रही थी उस वक्त ये सुसाइड बॉम्बिंग वहां पर हुई है. और इसी बीच आपको ये भी याद दिला दें कि जब अमेरिकन फोर्सेस वहां से विड्रॉ कर रही थी उस वक्त भी इस्लामिक स्टेट ने एक सुसाइड बॉम्बिंग को अंजाम दिया था जिसमें कई लोगों की जानें गई थी. 100 से ज्यादा लोगों की उस वक्त भी जान गई थी और माना जा रहा है कि इस हमले के पीछे भी इस्लामिक स्टेट का हाथ हो सकता है. हालांकि अब तक जिम्मेदारी नहीं ली गई है, लेकिन ये जरूर है कि इस्लामिक स्टेट की हिस्ट्री रही है कि वो शियाइट जो माइनॉरिटीज है उनको टारगेट करते आ रहे हैं, पहले भी करते आ रहे हैं. और माना जा रहा है कि इस हमले के पीछे भी शियाई जो इस्लामिक स्टेट है उसका हाथ हो सकता है. हालांकि अभी तक तालिबान गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से एक ऑफिशियल स्टेटमेंट इस पर नहीं आया है और माना जा रहा है कि इस पूरे मामले को लेकर तालिबान की जो वहां सरकार बनी है वो उस पर फिलहाल कदम उठा रही है. लेकिन ये एक बड़ी कैजुअलिटी है और याद दिलाती है अगस्त के अंत की, जब एक बड़ा ऐसा ही एक आतंकी हमला, एक सुसाइड बॉम्बिंग एयरपोर्ट के पास हुई थी जिसमें कई सिविलियंस की जान गई थी.
शैलेंद्र, कुछ ये जो आप कह रहे हैं कि आइसिस खोरासान ने पहले भी ऐसे आतंकी घटनाएं हुई थी, उसके लिए रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी भी लिया था उन्होंने. Is there anything that we know in terms of response from Iran? Because Shia community जो है, largely they come from Iran. This Kunduz province also has deep connections with Iran. इस घटने को, how will this be viewed in the wider region?
देखिए, नॉट ओनली ईरान बट हमने ये देखा है कि जो रेजोल्यूशन पास हुआ था यूएनएससी में भारत की अध्यक्षता में, उस रेजोल्यूशन में ये साफ था, 2593 जो रेजोल्यूशन है, कि जो माइनॉरिटीज हैं उनके राइट्स को ऑनर किया जाना चाहिए, महिलाओं के राइट्स को ऑनर किया जाना चाहिए. और सभी देश जिसमें भारत भी शामिल है और ईरान भी हम मानते हैं शामिल रहा है उस यूएनएससी की बैठक में, उस वक्त ये साफ किया गया था कि इन पॉइंट्स को, इन ऑब्जेक्टिव्स को पूरा करना होगा तालिबान को, तभी रिकॉग्निशन की बात इसमें होगी. लेकिन जाहिर तौर पर इस पे अभी तक ईरान का सीधा स्टेटमेंट नहीं आया क्योंकि अभी डेवलपिंग स्टोरी है. लेकिन माना जा रहा है कि जो शियाइट कम्युनिटी है उससे बहुत नाराज होगी और ईरान की तरफ से स्टेटमेंट एक्सपेक्ट किया जा सकता है. लेकिन जाहिर तौर पर ये फिलहाल सवाल खड़े होते हैं तालिबान गवर्नमेंट पे, जो लगातार ये श्योर कर रही थी कि अब वहां पर सब कुछ ठीक हो चुका है.
All right, Shailendra, thank you for joining us. So there have been multiple attacks just in the last couple of months or so. We had the big attack that happened at the airport, the Kabul airport. Then there was a big attack that happened in one of the largest mosques in Kabul. Again, I'm given to understand that it was the minority community, the ethnic minorities who were targeted in that. And now in Kunduz, this latest attack that's happened in Kunduz, where a Shia mosque was targeted. So clearly there is not just ethnic fault lines at play, but also this control of turf, as it were, between ISIS Khorasan and the Taliban that is also going on. And as Praveen said, many of them also happen to be former Pakistani recruits, as it were, former Pakistan, the people who were recruited by the ISI, former Pakistani linked fighters, as they were. Praveen, if I can come back to you, just in terms of how this story might play out in the wider region, whether it is Iran, I was asking Shailendra about that, or how even global capitals will react to this, because this was exactly the fear that the Taliban will not be able to not just govern, but this whole ethnic fault line will be ripped open with the arrival of the Taliban and the Taliban taking over the reins of power.
Absolutely right, Zaka. I think the important thing to watch here, of course, is going to be Iran, which has had deep connections with its co-religionists, Shia co-religionists in Afghanistan, has traditionally had relations with their political groups, with their various militia, and sees itself as a defender of the faith. It's no secret that Iran cultivated a relationship with the Taliban, hoping to get the Americans out. But has been suffering from a severe case of what you might call buyer's regret in recent months. Iran really feels that the Taliban have not lived up to their problems, are behaving in ways that threaten the Iranian Republic, and it will be worth watching how it responds to this massacre, whether it, for example, chooses to respond by arming and equipping various Shia militias in the region. The other player that's going to be really important is Russia. Remember, Kunduz is in the north of Afghanistan, and Afghan's north touches on the Central Asian states of Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. There are jihadist groups in the region, which, like the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, which have operated against both these countries. There are Tajik jihadists, in fact, who tore the country into a long-running civil war. And both the Taliban have relationships with these groups, and the Islamic State is also a more recent threat. So both these countries will be watching this and pushing Moscow, which is the security guarantor for them, to perhaps take a more cautious position on the on the Taliban than it initially did. So definitely, this is going to have some pretty big geopolitical consequences and will underline the concerns India has been pointing to for a very long time.
All right, Praveen, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us. Praveen Swami there reporting for us about this latest incident that's happened in Kunduz province. Over 100 feared, and AFP reporting that that number is likely to go up as well. Take a quick break. When we come back, the Maharaja is back where it belongs. The Tatas have successfully bid for Air India. A successful bid at a little over 18,000 crores. We'll get you all the details and reactions right on the other side of this quick break.
यहाँ जो आतंकवाद बढ़ाना चाहते हैं, उनको जब ये सूचना मिलती है कि टूरिस्ट इन्फ्लक्स बढ़ रहा है, उनको जब ये सूचना मिलती है कि नहीं इंडस्ट्रियल इन्वेस्टमेंट यहाँ आने वाला है, तो निश्चित रूप से उसमें व्यवधान पैदा करने की एक सोची समझी साजिश है। यहाँ जो आपस में प्रेम और मोहब्बत है, ये चिन्हित करके ऐसे निर्दोष लोगों को मारना ताकि इस तरह की भावना यहाँ पैदा हो और वो अपनी कोशिशों में कामयाब न हो, इसकी हर पुरजोर कोशिश की जाएगी।
Let us try and understand why we have seen a spate of civilian killings, especially of minorities in Srinagar. Is this the 90s redux? Lieutenant General Ata Hasnain, someone who served in the Kashmir Valley, is joining us on the show. So is Sumit Peer. General Hasnain, I'm coming to you first. Why and why now?
Thank you, first of all, for having me on your show, Shreya. And I start with the remorse, expression of deep regret at the loss of innocent lives. Unfortunately, once again, 30 years later, we saw this happening in 1990 and a return of this now. But that's not to say I would not agree with the saying that this is back to the 90s. That's a bit of an exaggeration. The situation since then has moved on tremendously. The Indian establishment, that is our establishment, has gained total control, domination. It's because of that that you will find sporadic attempts will be made by terrorist elements, their masterminds across the line of control, who will wish to once again regain traction, once again regain some form of relevance. It's very tempting on my part to say that this is all coming under directions from the Taliban 2.0. No, that's not true. But what's happened in Afghanistan is definitely an inspiration. It's sending out inspirational messages. And there are elements, disparate elements down below who are acting on their own in this manner. Of course, we cannot absolve Pakistan of issues such as this because Pakistan itself wants to ensure that the relevance of its proxies in Kashmir continues to remain. And the softest targets to achieve this kind of a thing are always the minorities. I remind your viewers, in the past we've had Vandhama, we've had Nandimar, we've had Chittisgarh. Whenever terrorists wanted to re-establish or send a message of their dominance in a particular area. That's exactly what is being attempted here, but I feel it's very different to the 90s. This is a sporadic attempt. As a professional, I can say emotionally, of course, there's something completely different, but I don't think this is something which is going to dent our confidence in any great way, except it will definitely socially dent the confidence of the Kashmiri Pandits, the returning Pandits, definitely. And we need to take stock of that.
General Hasnain, thank you for that analysis. Do stay on with us. Sumit, I'm just going to come to you because, I've spoken to many Kashmiri Pandits through the day, especially those who have lived through the 1990s. They say this is history being repeated at a time when the government has opened up Jammu and Kashmir to all Indians and is making an attempt to resettle Kashmiri Pandits in the valley. The killing of Pandits and non-Kashmiris is a blood-soaked message from across the border. Any attempt at normalcy and integration will be challenged via hardcore Islamic militancy. Take a look at this report. I'm going back to Sumit Peer after that.
Series of dead bodies lying on the streets. So these images are taking me back to 1990.
The spate of killings of Kashmiri Pandits and Sikhs in Srinagar have brought back bitter memories of the 90s for a generation that was forced to flee their homes, never to return. In the lead up to 1990, many prominent Kashmiri Pandits were killed by militants. Threatening slogans blared over loudspeakers from mosques, asking them to leave. On January 20th, 1990, the first batch of Pandits packed their belongings and left the valley. As the targeted killings grew, so did the exodus. Over 70,000 Kashmiri Pandits fled their homeland in just 2 years between 1990 and 1992. 400 were killed. Their properties were vandalized or quickly sold to Kashmiri Muslims. ML Bindru had the choice to leave. But he and around 800 Hindu families decided to stay on. Better to die in their beloved Kashmir than to live as refugees in their own country.
हमारे शैतानों ने उसे मार डाला है। जब लोग यहाँ से भाग गए, वो नहीं भागा, वो यहीं रहा।
Bindru is the third Kashmiri Pandit to have been shot dead in the valley since 2020. The terror outfit that shot him point blank called him an RSS stooge. On June 2nd, Rakesh Pandit, a BJP leader, was killed by militants in Tral. Ajay Pandit, a Congress party sarpanch, was killed in Anantnag last year. According to official data, at least 25 civilians, including 3 non-local residents and 2 Kashmiri Pandits, have been killed this year alone. Are the recent killings meant to prevent Kashmiri Pandits from returning to their homeland as part of the centre's ambitious rehabilitation plan?
44,000 कश्मीरी पंडित, मैं आज उनको बताना चाहता हूं कि यही नरेंद्र मोदी जी के शासन में कश्मीरी पंडितों को, हर परिवार को राहत कार्ड जिसके पास है उसको कश्मीर घाटी में घर के साथ 2022 के साथ हम बसा देंगे और वर्षों पुराना हमारा स्वप्न समाप्त।
Successive governments have promised to resettle Pandits in the valley, but nothing concrete has materialized. There was much optimism after the Modi government abolished Jammu and Kashmir's special status. It is clear the targeted killings of Kashmiri Pandits by Islamist groups are meant to dampen that optimism and
Welcome back to Viewpoint. Life came full circle for Tata Sons today when they regained control of Air India nearly 70 years after its nationalization. The conglomerate had placed a winning bid of 18,000 crores to reacquire the airline. Ridhima Bhatnagar has more.
The image of a flamboyant GRD Tata in front of an Air Boeing 747 is etched in everyone's memory. He was not just in charge of the Maharaja, but also India's first licensed pilot. He launched Tata Airlines in 1932, beginning as a night airmail service to a leading passenger carrier. Speak to anyone who knew GRD Tata and they would talk about him paying personal attention to every passenger's requirements and needs. That was the level of personal interest for GRT. Cut to 1946. Now renamed as Air India, the company was one of the few in the aviation sector to survive and thrive without a government subsidy. In 1948, Air India International